Grease covered Dave's hands as he worked under the broken atmospheric recycler. The machine had been making weird noises for 3 days, and now it finally died completely. He wiped sweat from his forehead with the back of his arm and cursed softly. This was the 3rd major repair this week, and he still hadn't been paid for the last 2 jobs. Haven's Rest wasn't the kind of place where people had much money. The mining colony sat on the edge of human space, where families came to dig rare metals from the ground and hope for a better future. Most of them were running from something back on Earth or the core worlds. Dave was one of them, though he tried not to think about that anymore. His garage stood at the end of the main street, squeezed between a general store and a bar that never seemed to close. The building was old and ugly, with rust stains running down the metal walls and a roof that leaked when it rained. But it was his, and that meant something on a world where most people rented everything from the big mining company. The recycler made a grinding sound when he tried to start it again. Dave sighed and reached for his tools. He had learned to fix almost anything over the years. When you lived on the frontier, you either learned to repair things yourself or you went without. There were no fancy repair shops or overnight shipping from the core worlds. Outside his garage, the wind was getting stronger. Haven's Rest had terrible weather most of the time, but today felt different. The air tasted like metal and electricity. Dave had seen enough storms to know this one would be bad. He was trying to remove a stuck bolt when someone knocked on his door. Dave frowned and looked at the clock on his workbench. It was almost midnight, and normal people didn't visit mechanics this late. Maybe someone's vehicle had broken down in the growing storm. 2 young women stood outside his door when he opened it. They were soaked from the rain that had just started, and they looked scared. Dave had never seen them before, which was strange because Haven's Rest was small enough that everyone knew everyone else. The taller one had long dark hair that stuck to her face from the rain. She wore clothes that looked expensive but were now dirty and torn. The shorter one had lighter hair and kept looking over her shoulder like something was chasing them. "Please," the tall one said. "We need shelter. Just for tonight." Dave looked past them at the storm that was building outside. Lightning flashed in the distance, and the wind was strong enough to bend the small trees along the street. "Nobody should be out in weather like this. Come in," he said, stepping back from the door. The 2 women hurried inside, and Dave closed the door behind them. Up close, he could see they were both young, maybe in their early 20s. They had an odd way of moving, like they were used to people getting out of their way. Their clothes were definitely not local. The fabric was too fine, and the cut was too fancy for a mining colony. "I'm Dave," he said. "Dave Collins." The tall one looked at her companion before answering. "I'm Lyra, this is my sister Nova." Their voices had an accent Dave couldn't place. It wasn't from any of the core worlds he knew. Maybe they were from one of the outer rim colonies that had been settled by non-English speakers. "You picked a bad night to be traveling," Dave said. "This storm is going to be rough. The weather service sent out warnings all day." Lyra nodded. "We became separated from our escort. We've been walking for hours." Dave wondered what kind of escort would leave 2 young women alone on a night like this. But he didn't ask. People came to Haven's Rest for all kinds of reasons, and most of them didn't like talking about their past. "You both look cold," he said. "I've got some dry clothes upstairs, and I can heat up some food." Nova spoke for the first time. "You would do this for strangers?" There was something strange about the way she asked the question, like the idea surprised her. Dave shrugged. "It's just basic human decency," he said. "Besides, nobody should be out in a storm like this." He led them through his garage to the stairs that went up to his small apartment. The place wasn't much to look at. He had a bedroom, a tiny kitchen, and a living room with an old couch and a table he had built himself. But it was clean and warm, which was more than a lot of people on Haven's Rest could say about their homes. Dave found some old clothes that might fit them and pointed to the bathroom. "Get changed and I'll see what I have for dinner." His kitchen didn't have much food. Dave lived mostly on protein bars and instant meals that he bought from the company store, but he found some soup in a can and started heating it on his small stove. The 2 women came out of the bathroom wearing his old work shirts and pants that were too big for them. They looked more comfortable now, but Dave noticed they both kept glancing at the windows when lightning flashed outside. "The storm should pass by tomorrow," Dave said as he served the soup. "Maybe the day after. These big ones usually last a while." Lyra tasted the soup carefully like she wasn't sure what it was. "This is very kind of you," she said. "We didn't expect to find such hospitality." Again, there was something odd about the way she talked. Dave got the feeling these two weren't used to simple food or small apartments. Maybe they were from rich families who had fallen on hard times. "Where were you trying to get to?" Dave asked. The sisters looked at each other again. Nova started to say something, but Lyra cut her off. "The spaceport," Lyra said. "We have passage on a ship leaving tomorrow." Dave shook his head. "Nothing's leaving tomorrow. This storm will ground everything for at least 2 days. The ion interference plays hell with navigation systems." Nova looked worried. "We cannot stay here that long." "Why not?" Dave asked. "Are you running from someone?" The question seemed to make both women nervous. They didn't answer, and Dave decided not to push. Everyone on Haven's Rest was running from something. After dinner, Dave gave them his bedroom and made himself comfortable on the couch. As he lay there listening to the storm outside, he wondered who these two really were. Their clothes, their accents, their manners, everything about them seemed wrong for a backwater mining colony. But that was their business. Dave had learned long ago that the best way to survive on the frontier was to help people when you could, and not ask too many questions about their past. The storm raged all night. Shaking the building and filling the air with electricity, Dave fell asleep to the sound of thunder and wind, not knowing that he had just given shelter to two of the most important people in the galaxy. Dave woke up to the sound of metal grinding against metal. He rolled off the couch and checked the time. It was barely dawn, but someone was moving around in his garage downstairs. He grabbed a wrench from his toolbox and crept down the stairs, wondering if someone was trying to steal his equipment. Nova was standing next to his workbench, holding a broken power coupling in her hands. She was examining it closely, turning it over and running her fingers along the damaged parts. She had found the box of broken components that Dave kept meaning to throw away. "What are you doing?" Dave asked. Nova jumped and almost dropped the coupling. "I apologize. I couldn't sleep and I heard this machine calling out in pain." Dave stared at her. "Calling out in pain?" She blushed and looked down at the floor. "I meant it was making noise. Mechanical noise. I can hear when things are broken." That was a strange way to put it, but Dave had known mechanics who claimed they could hear problems in engines. Some people just had better ears than others. "That's from the atmospheric recycler," Dave said. "The one I was working on yesterday. The coupling burned out and I can't afford a new one." Nova held up the broken piece. "What if it could be repaired instead of replaced?" Dave laughed. "That thing is fried. Look at the burn marks. The metal is warped and half the circuits are melted." But Nova was already walking over to his welding station. She moved with confidence, like she knew exactly what she was doing. She turned on the equipment and began working on the coupling with steady, precise movements. Dave watched in amazement as she carefully rebuilt the damaged circuits and straightened the warped metal. Her technique was flawless, better than anything Dave had seen from trained professionals. Within an hour, the coupling looked almost new. "How did you learn to do that?" Dave asked. Nova smiled. "My people are good with metal. We understand how it wants to move." Before Dave could ask what she meant by that, Lyra came downstairs. She was wearing one of his work shirts and looked more relaxed than she had the night before. "The storm is still strong," she said, looking toward the windows. Dave nodded. "It'll probably last another day or two. These big ion storms take time to blow themselves out." He installed the repaired coupling in the atmospheric recycler and turned it on. The machine hummed quietly, running better than it had in months. Nova had done something to improve its efficiency along with fixing the damage. "That's incredible work," Dave said. "Where did you learn mechanical engineering?" Lyra answered for her sister. "We've both studied the principles of construction and repair. Our education was quite comprehensive." Dave got the impression they came from some kind of wealthy family with access to the best schools. That would explain their manners and their expensive clothes. Maybe they were running away from an arranged marriage or family pressure. The three of them spent the morning working together in the garage. Dave had several repair jobs backed up, and he was surprised by how much the sisters knew about machinery. Lyra understood complex engineering principles, while Nova had an almost magical ability to diagnose problems. When Mrs. Chen from the general store brought her broken refrigeration unit, Nova listened to it for less than a minute before pointing to exactly where the problem was. When the power grid at the school started acting up, Lyra quickly figured out that the issue was with the voltage regulator, not the main transformer like everyone thought. Dave found himself enjoying their company. They asked intelligent questions about his work and seemed genuinely interested in learning. Most people on Haven's Rest saw mechanics as just another service provider, like the guy who emptied the trash or delivered supplies. Around noon, Dave's emergency communicator went off. Dr. Martinez from the medical center sounded panicked. "Dave, we need your help. The main atmospheric processor just failed, and we've got 30 patients on life support. The backup system won't last more than a few hours." Dave grabbed his emergency toolkit and headed for the door. "I'll be right there." Lyra and Nova followed him outside into the storm. The wind was strong enough to knock a person down, and the rain felt like ice. They had to hold on to each other to make it down the street to the medical center. The atmospheric processor was a big machine that cleaned and recycled the air inside the building. When it failed, carbon dioxide would build up and oxygen levels would drop. With sick people depending on breathing assistance, that could be deadly in a matter of hours. Dave looked at the processor and felt his heart sink. The main control unit was completely burned out, and he didn't have the parts to rebuild it. A new unit would take weeks to ship from the core worlds, and that was if they could afford one. "Can you fix it?" Dr. Martinez asked. Dave shook his head. "Not with what I have. The control unit is totally fried, and I'd need at least 3 different replacement parts." Nova was walking around the machine, listening to it with her head tilted to one side. "What about taking parts from other machines?" she asked. "There aren't any other processors on Haven's Rest," Dave said. "This is the only one." "Not processors," Nova said. "But there are other machines that use similar components." She was right. Dave started thinking about what equipment around town might have compatible parts. The main power station had voltage regulators that might work. The water treatment plant had circuit boards that could be modified. The mining equipment had processors that could be reprogrammed. Working together through the afternoon and into the evening, Dave and the sisters stripped parts from machines all over Haven's Rest. They modified circuits, rebuilt connections, and jury-rigged solutions that no engineering textbook would approve of. Lyra proved to have an incredible understanding of how different systems could work together. She could look at a circuit board from a water pump and immediately see how it could be modified to work in an air processor. Nova's contribution was even more impressive. She seemed to know exactly which parts would work and which ones wouldn't, often without even testing them. She would pick up a component, hold it for a moment, and then either add it to their pile or set it aside. "How do you know that won't work?" Dave asked after she rejected a perfectly good-looking circuit board. "It feels wrong," Nova said. "The metal is tired. It would fail under stress." Dave tested the board with his instruments and found she was right. There were microfractures in the circuits that would have caused problems later. By midnight, they had rebuilt the atmospheric processor using parts from a dozen different machines. It looked like something a crazy inventor might have put together, with wires and components that didn't match. But when Dave turned it on, it worked perfectly. Dr. Martinez nearly cried with relief when the air quality readings returned to normal. "I don't know how to thank you," he said. Dave was exhausted, but he felt good about the work they had done. "Just doing my job, Doc." As they walked back to the garage through the storm, Lyra touched his arm. "What you did tonight saved many lives. You asked for no payment, no recognition. You simply saw people who needed help and provided it." "Anyone would have done the same thing," Dave said. The sisters looked at each other, and Nova spoke quietly. "No, Dave Collins. Not anyone would have done what you did tonight." Something in her voice made Dave look at them more carefully. In the lightning flashes, their eyes seemed to glow with their own light. But that was probably just his imagination after a long day of hard work. Back at the garage, the 3 of them collapsed on Dave's couch, too tired to worry about sleeping arrangements. Dave fell asleep thinking about how much he had enjoyed working with Lyra and Nova. It had been a long time since he had felt like part of a team. Dave found Lyra standing at his kitchen window, staring up at the morning sky with worry written across her face. The storm had finally passed during the night, leaving the air clean and still. But instead of the usual empty sky, several dark shapes hung in orbit above Haven's Rest. "Those are military ships," Dave said, joining her at the window. "Looks like patrol vessels. Maybe they're doing training exercises." Lyra didn't answer. Her hands were pressed flat against the glass, and Dave could see tension in every line of her body. Nova sat at his kitchen table, but she wasn't eating the breakfast Dave had prepared. She kept glancing toward the door like she expected someone to break it down. "Is everything okay?" Dave asked. The sisters looked at each other with the same silent communication Dave had noticed before. Finally, Lyra turned away from the window. "Dave, we need to tell you something," she said. "We haven't been completely honest about who we are." Dave poured himself coffee and sat down at the table. He had been expecting this conversation. Nothing about these two had made sense from the beginning. "Okay," he said. "I'm listening." Lyra took a deep breath. "We're not human." Dave waited for her to continue, but she just stood there looking at him. Nova was watching him too, like they expected him to start screaming or run away. "All right," Dave said after a moment. "What are you then?" "We are Draknari," Nova said quietly. "What your people might call dragons, though that word doesn't translate well." Dave looked back and forth between them. They looked perfectly human to him, except for those unusual golden eyes and their too graceful way of moving. "Dragons," Dave repeated. "Our natural form is different," Lyra explained. "We can appear human when necessary, but it requires effort to maintain." Dave sipped his coffee and thought about this. He had heard stories about alien species that could change their shape, but he had never put much stock in such tales. Still, it would explain their strange accents, their knowledge of advanced engineering, and their odd reactions to simple human kindness. "Are you going to eat me?" Dave asked. Nova looked shocked. "What? No. We don't eat people." "Then I guess it doesn't matter what you are," Dave said. "You needed help, I gave it to you. That's all there is to it." The sisters stared at him like he had said something incredible. Lyra sat down heavily in the chair across from him. "You're not afraid?" she asked. "Should I be?" Dave replied. "You fixed my machines, helped save lives at the medical center, and haven't caused any trouble. Why would I be afraid of you?" Before either sister could answer, Dave's emergency radio crackled to life. The voice of Sheriff Murphy, Haven's Rest's only law enforcement officer, came through the static. "All residents stay in your homes. We have military visitors conducting a search operation. Do not interfere with their activities." Through the window, Dave could see armored figures moving down the main street. They were tall and moved with the same fluid grace as Lyra and Nova. But these newcomers carried weapons and had an air of barely controlled violence about them. "They're looking for us," Nova whispered. Dave understood now. These two weren't just any aliens, they were important somehow. Important enough that their people would send military forces to find them. "Why are they hunting you?" Dave asked. "Because our father doesn't understand," Lyra said. "He arranged marriages for us, political alliances to prevent war between our people and yours. We refused and left home. He believes humans have kidnapped us or corrupted us somehow," Nova added. "He doesn't think we could choose to leave on our own." Dave could hear boots on the street outside getting closer. The search parties were moving systematically from building to building. "Your father," Dave said. "He's important?" "He's our king," Lyra said simply. Dave nearly choked on his coffee. "Your father is the king of the dragons?" "The Draknari Empire," Nova corrected. "And he's probably very angry right now." The sound of boots stopped outside Dave's garage. Through the window, Dave could see 3 armored figures examining his building. One of them was pointing at the upper windows where his apartment was located. "Is there another way out of here?" Lyra asked. Dave thought quickly. "The maintenance tunnels. The whole colony is connected underground for repair work and emergency access." He led them to a hidden panel in his bedroom floor that opened onto a narrow tunnel filled with pipes and cables. The space was barely big enough to crawl through, but it connected to the main service network under Haven's Rest. "Follow the main tunnel toward the power station," Dave whispered. "There's an exit near the old mining equipment graveyard. Stay there until dark, then come back here." "What about you?" Nova asked. "I'll be fine," Dave said. "I'm just a mechanic. They have no reason to suspect me." The sisters disappeared into the tunnel just as someone started pounding on Dave's front door. Dave quickly replaced the floor panel and went downstairs to answer. 3 Draknari soldiers stood outside his garage. Up close, Dave could see they weren't quite human despite their disguise. Their features were too perfect, their movements too controlled, and their eyes held an ancient intelligence that made Dave feel very young. "Human," the leader said. "We seek 2 of our kind who may have passed through this area. Have you seen anyone unusual in recent days?" Dave kept his expression neutral. "Just the regular folks from town. Though with that storm we had, most people stayed indoors." The soldier studied Dave's face carefully. These individuals would appear as young human females. They may have sought shelter during the storm. "Nobody came here," Dave lied smoothly. My place isn't exactly set up for guests. The soldiers searched his garage thoroughly, examining every corner and checking behind equipment. Dave watched nervously as they poked around his workbench, but they didn't find the hidden tunnel entrance. "You are skilled with machines," one soldier observed, looking at Dave's repair work. "It's my job," Dave said. "Our people value such skills," the soldier continued. "Perhaps you would consider employment off-world." "The pay would be considerable." Dave shook his head. "Thanks, but I like it here. Heaven's Rest is home." The soldiers left without finding anything, but Dave noticed they posted guards at various points around the colony. The search wasn't over. They were just being more careful now. That evening, after the streets had cleared, Dave heard a soft knock at his back door. Lyra and Nova slipped inside, looking tired and worried. "They're everywhere," Lyra said, "and more ships arrived this afternoon." "Your father really wants you back," Dave observed. "He thinks humans are a dangerous species that will corrupt the galaxy," Nova explained. "Finding us here will only confirm his beliefs about your people." Dave made them dinner while they explained more about their situation. The Draknari were an old race that had watched humanity's rapid expansion across the galaxy with growing concern. King Aldrich saw humans as chaotic and destructive, a threat to the ordered civilizations his people had spent millennia building. "The marriages he arranged were supposed to create bonds between our species," Lyra said. "Political alliances that would prevent war. But we couldn't go through with it," Nova added. "Not after seeing what humans are really like." "What do you mean?" Dave asked. "Your kindness," Lyra said. "Your willingness to help strangers. The way you worked all night to save people at the medical center without asking for anything in return. That's just normal human behavior," Dave said. "That's exactly what we're trying to tell our father," Nova replied. "But he won't listen to us." Dave understood the problem now. These two had run away from home to avoid arranged marriages, and their father thought evil humans had brainwashed them. The longer they stayed hidden, the more convinced King Aldrich would become that humans were the enemy. "Maybe you should go back," Dave suggested. "Talk to your father, explain what really happened." Both sisters shook their heads immediately. "He won't listen to us now," Lyra said. "He'll assume we've been corrupted by human influence. And he'll probably destroy Haven's Rest as punishment," Nova added quietly. Dave felt cold fear in his stomach. He looked out at the lights of the colony, thinking about all the families who lived here. Children, elderly people, sick patients at the medical center. None of them deserved to die because two dragon princesses had asked a mechanic for shelter during a storm. Then, "We need to find another solution," Dave said. He spent the rest of the night thinking about the problem, while the sisters slept. By morning, he had made a decision that would probably get him killed. But it was the only plan that might save Haven's Rest and give Lyra and Nova a chance at the freedom they wanted. Dave walked down the main street of Haven's Rest with his hands shaking slightly. He had made stupid decisions before, but this one might actually get him killed. The largest Draknari ship hung in the sky above the colony like a metal mountain, its shadow covering half the town. Smaller patrol vessels circled the area, and armed soldiers walked the streets. Everyone in town was hiding indoors, but Dave needed to be seen. He needed to look like he was just going about his normal business. He stopped at Mrs. Chen's store to buy coffee, nodded to the soldiers posted at the street corners, and made his way toward the colony's central square. King Aldrich stood in the middle of the square like a statue carved from stone. Even in human form, he was obviously not from Haven's Rest. He was tall and moved with absolute confidence, surrounded by guards who watched everything with predatory attention. His clothes looked simple, but Dave could tell they were made from materials that probably cost more than most people on Haven's Rest, made in a year. Dave had seen pictures of politicians and military leaders on the news feeds, but he had never been in the presence of someone who actually ruled over millions of people. The king's presence was overwhelming, like standing too close to a powerful machine. "Your Majesty," Dave said, walking straight up to the group. The guards immediately raised their weapons, but King Aldrich held up a hand to stop them. He studied Dave with golden eyes that seemed to see everything. "You are the mechanic," the king said. It wasn't a question. "Dave Collins," Dave replied. "I fix things." "Indeed. My soldiers tell me you claim to know nothing about my daughters." Dave met the king's gaze steadily. "I lied." A murmur went through the assembled guards. Several of them took a step closer, but again the king gestured for them to wait. "You admit to deception?" King Aldrich said. Why? Because your daughters asked me to, Dave said simply. They were scared and I was trying to protect them. The king's expression didn't change, but Dave could feel the temperature around them getting colder. You presumed to protect the royal daughters of the Draknari Empire from their own father? I presumed to help two young women who didn't want to be forced into marriages they didn't choose, Dave corrected. That got a reaction. The king's eyes flashed with anger, and Dave could swear he saw something inhuman move behind those golden irises. You know nothing of our ways, human, King Aldrich said. Those marriages would have prevented a war that could consume this entire sector. Maybe, Dave said. But they would have made your daughters miserable for the rest of their lives. Their happiness is less important than the survival of billions. Dave shook his head. No, it isn't. Everyone deserves the right to choose their own path, even princesses. King Aldrich stepped closer, and Dave had to fight the urge to back away. The alien king towered over him, radiating a sense of power that made Dave feel like an insect. You dare lecture me about the welfare of my own children? I dare tell you the truth, Dave said. Your daughters aren't corrupted or brainwashed. They're smart, capable women who want to make their own decisions about their lives. Where are they? The king demanded. Dave was about to answer when a commotion broke out near the edge of the square. Lyra and Nova were walking toward them, still wearing Dave's old work clothes but moving with the regal bearing Dave now realized he should have recognized from the beginning. Father, Lyra said as she approached, we are here. King Aldrich's expression softened slightly when he saw his daughters, but his voice remained stern. You will return to the ship immediately. This foolishness has gone on long enough. We're not going back, Nova said firmly. Not to the marriages you arranged and not to a life where our choices don't matter. The king's anger returned full force. Your choices have consequences beyond your understanding. Do you think this human's crude kindness is worth the lives of everyone on this planet? Dave felt his blood run cold. You'd destroy Haven's Rest because your daughters made their own decisions? I will do what is necessary to prevent war, King Aldrich replied. This colony has harbored fugitives and interfered with Draknari royal business. These people had nothing to do with this, Dave said. I'm the one who helped your daughters. If you want to punish someone, punish me. Lyra stepped between Dave and her father. If you harm him or anyone else on this planet, you'll prove everything we've been trying to tell you is wrong. You've been among humans for 4 days, the king said dismissively. You cannot judge their entire species based on one individual's actions. Can't you judge them based on what you've seen here? Nova asked. This man risked his life to help strangers. He worked all night to save sick people without asking for payment. He's standing up to you right now even though he knows you could kill him. King Aldrich looked around the square at the watching guards and the empty buildings where frightened colonists hid. I see a primitive society that corrupts those it touches. You see what you want to see, Lyra said. Just like you always have. The argument might have continued, but Dave's emergency radio crackled to life again. Dr. Martinez's voice came through, tight with panic. Emergency at the medical center. Solar flare incoming, massive radiation burst. All electronic systems are failing. We're losing life support for critical patients. Dave looked up at the sky. He couldn't see anything yet, but he knew solar flares could be devastating to a colony's delicate electronics. Haven's Rest didn't have the heavy shielding that protected ships and major space stations. How long until it hits? Dave asked into his radio. 20 minutes, maybe less. The backup generators won't handle this level of electromagnetic interference. Dave turned to King Aldrich. Your ships have shielding, right? You could protect the colony. The king's expression was cold. This is not my concern. These are innocent people, Dave said. Children, elderly folks, sick patients who will die if the life support fails. Then perhaps you should have considered that before harboring fugitives. Dave stared at the alien king in disbelief. He had known powerful people could be cruel, but he hadn't expected this level of callousness from someone whose daughters spoke about him with love, despite their disagreements. Fine, Dave said. Then I'll do it myself. He started walking toward the medical center, pulling out his tools as he went. He had no idea how to protect the colony's electronics from a solar flare, but he couldn't just stand there and watch people die. Dave, wait, Nova called after him. There's nothing you can do, King Aldrich said. Human technology cannot withstand such forces. Dave turned back to face the king. Maybe not. But I'm going to try anyway because that's what humans do. We don't give up just because something seems impossible. He continued walking toward the medical center, his mind already working on the problem. The main power grid would need rerouting. The sensitive electronics would need additional shielding, and he'd have to find a way to keep the backup generators stable during the electromagnetic surge. Behind him, he could hear Lyra and Nova arguing with their father in a language he didn't understand. Their voices were getting louder and more heated, but Dave didn't have time to listen. He had work to do, and only minutes to figure out how to save his neighbors from forces beyond anything he had ever faced. As he ran toward the medical center, Dave couldn't help but think this was exactly the kind of problem that separated humans from other species. When faced with impossible odds, most people would probably surrender to fate, but humans had a stubborn refusal to accept defeat, even when logic said they should. He just hoped that stubborn refusal would be enough to save Haven's Rest. Dave reached the medical center just as the first wave of electromagnetic interference hit Haven's Rest. The lights flickered throughout the building, and he could hear electronic equipment starting to fail all around the colony. Dr. Martinez met him at the entrance, looking desperate. The main power grid is fluctuating wildly, the doctor said. We've got 15 patients on life support, and the backup generators won't hold against this kind of interference. Dave ran to the power control room and looked at the readings. The solar flare was stronger than anything he had seen before. Normal electromagnetic shielding wouldn't be enough. They needed something much more powerful. Get everyone to the center of the building, Dave told Dr. Martinez. Away from the outer walls, and find me every piece of metal sheeting you can. Dave worked frantically to reroute power systems and create makeshift electromagnetic shielding. He stripped wiring from non-essential equipment and jury-rigged connections that would have made safety inspectors faint. But nothing he did was going to be enough. The solar flare was building to its peak, and Dave could see sparks flying from overloaded circuits throughout the medical center. In a few minutes, everything electronic in the building would be fried, and the patients depending on life support would die. That was when King Aldrich appeared in the doorway of the power control room. Dave looked up from his work, sweat dripping from his forehead. Change your mind about helping? The king didn't answer immediately. He was watching Dave work with an expression Dave couldn't read. Lyra and Nova stood behind their father, and Dave could see they had been arguing with him. You cannot possibly succeed, King Aldrich said. Probably not, Dave agreed, continuing to work on the power routing. But I'm going to try anyway. Why? Dave paused in his work and looked up at the king. Because that's what you do for your neighbors. You help them when they need it, even if it's hopeless. These people cannot help you in return. You gain nothing from this effort. I don't need to gain anything, Dave said. They're in trouble and I can try to help. That's enough. King Aldrich was quiet for a moment. Then he said, Show me what you are doing. Dave explained his plan quickly. He was trying to create a Faraday cage around the critical systems using metal sheeting and improvised grounding. It wouldn't stop all the electromagnetic interference, but it might reduce it enough to keep the life support systems running. The principle is sound, the king admitted, but your materials are insufficient. It's all I have, Dave said. The king studied the setup for another moment. Then he spoke into a small device in his own language. Within minutes, Draknari soldiers were bringing advanced shielding equipment into the medical center. Your approach is correct, King Aldrich said, but this will be more effective. Dave watched in amazement as the aliens set up their equipment. The shielding technology was far beyond anything humans had developed, but the basic principle was the same as what Dave had been trying to do. I don't understand, Dave said. Why are you helping? King Aldrich was adjusting the alien equipment with practiced efficiency. I am observing human behavior under stress. The solar flare reached its peak just as they finished setting up the shielding. Dave held his breath as electromagnetic radiation washed over Haven's Rest. Throughout the colony, he could see lights going out and equipment failing. But inside the medical center, the life support systems continued to run steadily. It worked, Dr. Martinez said in amazement. All patients are stable. Dave felt relief wash over him. Then he realized King Aldrich was still watching him with that unreadable expression. You risked your life for people who cannot reward you, the king said. That's not why I did it. No. King Aldrich was quiet for a moment. My daughters have been telling me that humans are not what I believed them to be. I thought they were naive, influenced by your primitive emotions. Maybe they were right, Dave suggested. Perhaps. The king looked out the window at the colony, where people were starting to emerge from their homes to check on their neighbors. In all my years of ruling, I have seen many species. Most are motivated by self-interest even when they claim to serve higher purposes. Humans aren't perfect, Dave said. We make mistakes, we're selfish sometimes. But most of us try to do the right thing when it matters. King Aldrich watched as Dave helped Dr. Martinez check on the patients. Every person in the medical center was safe and the crisis was over. But Dave didn't stop working. He was already thinking about how to repair the damage to the colony's power grid and help people whose equipment had been damaged by the flare. You continue working even though the immediate danger has passed, the king observed. People will need help getting their lives back to normal, Dave said. Some families probably lost their refrigeration units, maybe their heaters. That's dangerous on a world like this. For the first time since Dave had met him, King Aldrich smiled. It was a small expression, but it completely changed his face. Lyra, Nova, the king called to his daughters. Come here. The sisters approached cautiously, unsure what their father was thinking. You were correct about this human, King Aldrich said. And if you were correct about him, perhaps you are correct about his entire species. Does this mean you won't force us into those marriages? Nova asked hopefully. It means we will discuss alternatives, the king said. Political alliances can take many forms. Perhaps friendship and trade agreements would serve better than marriage contracts. Lyra hugged her father, and Dave could see the relief in both sisters' faces. What about Haven's Rest? Dave asked. You're not going to punish the colony? King Aldrich shook his head. This place will become something new. An embassy, perhaps. A place where humans and Draknari can learn to understand each other. An embassy, Dave repeated. Every embassy needs a cultural liaison, the king said. Someone who understands both peoples and can help them work together. Dave looked around at the medical center, then out at the colony where he had spent the last few years of his life. I'm just a mechanic. You are a human who sheltered strangers in a storm and risked his life to save his neighbors, King Aldrich corrected. That makes you exactly the right person for this job. Over the following days, Dave watched as Haven's Rest transformed from a struggling mining colony into something unprecedented. The first formal meeting place between humans and Draknari. Advanced alien technology helped repair the damage from the solar flare, while human ingenuity found ways to integrate the new systems with existing infrastructure. Lyra and Nova stayed to help with the transition, and Dave found himself working closely with them to establish protocols for cultural exchange. It was strange to think that his simple act of helping two travelers during a storm had led to first contact between civilizations. But as Dave worked in his garage, now expanded to include both human and Draknari technology, he realized that maybe it wasn't so strange after all. The best things in life usually started with someone deciding to help a stranger. Regardless of the consequences, King Aldrich visited frequently, bringing diplomats and scientists who wanted to learn about human society. And every time he came, he made a point of stopping by Dave's garage to see how the cultural exchange was progressing. Do you ever regret your decision to help my daughters? The king asked during one of these visits. Dave looked around at his transformed home, where humans and aliens worked side by side to build something new. Never, he said. This is what humans do best. We adapt, we help each other, and we find ways to make things work. Indeed, King Aldrich agreed. That is exactly what makes your species so remarkable. As the king left to attend another diplomatic meeting, Dave returned to his work. He had a water recycling unit to repair, and Mrs. Chen needed her refrigeration system upgraded with the new Draknari components. It was still the same basic job he had always done, fixing things for his neighbors. The only difference was that now his neighborhood included the entire galaxy.